Yeah, thank you. So, at the outset, let me thank the organizers for inviting me to this very prestigious forum. In the 10 minutes that I have at my disposal, I will segment my presentation, my talking points, into three sections. The first will talk about what I believe is unique about IMEC and which should make IMEC go to the next stage. The second is where are India's equities in IMEC and why India believes that it's integral to the success of IMEC. And then I come fundamentally to how I see India and Greece being able to not just deepen their own collaboration, but become integral stakeholders to the IMEC project. Ever since the pandemic and the ensuing conflicts have taken place, we have seen a particular concept become important in the strategic calculus of countries, and we call it land sea synergetic use. The land and the sea now are seen not as exclusive domains, but they are seen as part of one connected continuum. And so, in terms of corridors in the world, we were often talking of land corridors and maritime corridors, but the most critical corridors today for supply chain resilience, diversification, and risk mitigation are those that combine the land and the maritime vectors. In fact, IMEC is only second to the INSTC in terms of being a multimodal, multi stakeholder land sea collaborative exercise, and that's what makes IMEC very important. The second point is IMEC is unique because it is non Chinese, it is non Russian, it is non US. Although the US supports IMEC, it is not a critical blesser of IMEC. So IMEC is a project that is essentially forged by middle powers, by regional powers, and rising powers. And at a time of intense major power geopolitics, a project like IMEC brings a certain degree of democraticness, a certain degree of multilateralism that we all require for security, stability, and sustainability. IMEC is, of course, multimodal, but IMEC is multi vectored, and that is important. We understand the physical multimodal nature of IMEC. But IMEC is not only about trade, it's not only about transportation, it's about energy, it's about digitalization, it's about the blue economy, it's about the solar alliance. So it actually aligns itself with a lot of portfolios of strategic nature, which we call global commons in the international domain. And so IMEC has the ability not just to be a single corridor, but to actually be a corridor hub which can stimulate development across three geographies, namely South Asia, West Asia, and the Mediterranean part of Europe. So, what are India's equities in IMEC and why India believes IMEC is so important? Until now, 50% of India's export used to move east to economies in Southeast Asia and East Asia. But India has factored in that the FTAs it has signed with these countries has not delivered the kind of results that India expected. And so India is actively now looking west. 20% of India's trade, that's about $180 billion, is shipped and routed through the Red Sea. And the Red Sea remains the singular artillery lifeline for India's trade with Europe and beyond. Now, that's not sustainable. And clearly, India has to look at alternative routes which will provide it the kind of risk mitigation and the risk diversification that it desires. India is right now in a golden sweet spot, partly offered by Trump and his behavior with India, that India is now spreading the canvas wide in terms of its FTAs. India has signed a limited trade agreement with the UAE. It's trying to sign an FTA with the GCC. They're doing a CEPA with Oman. The negotiations with Israel on the FTA have begun. And as you would all know, our FTA with the European Union, which was languishing for 2 decades, is now in the final stretch and maybe will get done in the next couple of months, if not faster. All of this is going to provide a fillip to IMEC because if you have these free trade agreements, you obviously have the logic of being able to trade more through this particular alignment. For a long time, India did not invest in ports. In fact, the preceding speaker, I think, made some wonderful points talking about the port logistics and the political economy of ports. India was nowhere on the shipping map. We were nowhere on the transshipment map. But Prime Minister Modi in his third term has now focused on ports. So while everyone knows three ports of India, namely the Mundra port, the Kandla port, and the JNPT port of Mumbai, two major greenfield ports are emerging as transshipment hubs over the next 5 to 7 years. One is in Maharashtra, it's called the Wadhwan port, and the other is in the state of Kerala, also on the west coast of India, overlooking the Arabian Sea, which is called the Vizhinjam port. And Singapore is going to be a big loser because up to 30 to 40% of its transshipment business will move to these ports because India becomes the perfect connector for Europe and the Mediterranean all the way to East Asia and Southeast Asia. But India is also investing in terminals and ports abroad with investments in Haifa, investments in Duqm port of Oman, investment in Jebel Ali, and of course the terminal in Piraeus, which India is also interested in doing so. The next point is that when it comes to the corridor, the IMEC corridor for India is not simply about trade or about transportation. It's about building the logistics of the corridor. And what does it mean? So India looks at IMEC not only in terms of maritime infrastructure, but in terms of building up the human capital with regard to the maritime sector. So maritime skill sets, maritime education, maritime culture, and maritime collaboration at the societal level is something that is going to make IMEC a long-term, kind of a horse. So where is India, Greece, and IMEC positioned? The first thing about India and Greece is we are two countries with a long maritime rich civilization. And so maritime collaboration is in our muscle memory. And that's why over the last 3 years, when our respective prime ministers have made visits to each other's countries, it has really brought to the fore the maritime vision that we have had for our respective countries. But we have to convert that maritime vision into actionable initiatives. And to that extent, IMEC provides us a good opportunity because both Greece and India are on extreme ends of IMEC, and we are both potential gateways for mutually reinforcing trade. For us, Greece becomes a very important pathway, an economic pathway, and a strategic gateway to Europe. And for Greece and for countries in Europe and West Asia, we become a very important gateway to access the South China Sea and beyond to countries in East Asia and, of course, in the South Pacific. Our two countries are rooted in strategic autonomy. So whether it's Greece or whether it's India, we are not part of power blocks. And that's why we don't believe either in containment or we don't believe in reductionist enterprises. So our maritime vision is effectively aggregationist and not reductionist in nature. And that's why as we look to build our maritime future, we do it through natural collaboration and not by sidelining any country. India and Greece are right now, and in fact, it's a very opportune moment to speak about this because just yesterday in Athens, both countries had their first inaugural maritime security dialogue, and 4 or 5 important issues were engaged there. Both countries talked about enhancing maritime domain awareness in their respective maritime geographies, which are so very important because non-traditional security threats are, growing as we speak. The countries spoke about humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. And again, this becomes extremely important in the context of being a first responder to all kinds of disasters, which can, of course, impact not just the ports, but can in fact the port communities that live and the societies that live on coastal territories. We also spoke in terms of energy routes, in terms of deep sea cable configuration, and in terms of shipping alignments. The third area of natural convergence for both countries is we want to rebuild our shipping sector. In fact, India has gone off the map in terms of shipbuilding sector, but has taken strong steps over the last 12 to 18 months to boost its shipbuilding sector. And we're looking essentially at making eco-friendly shipping. Of course, we already have engagements with Norway, with Sweden, with South Korea, with Japan, but India and Greece, given their maritime heft, can work together in jointly, collaboratively building the eco-friendly shipping that we need going forward, which we all call as green shipping, which will give us a stakeholding in the international sphere and not have to unduly depend on China. Our respective port development is not only about development of ports. I think the point was well made by the preceding speaker, where he said you must not look only at Piraeus. You must look at all four ports that you have, which are on different parts of Greece, and India is doing something similar. So not to look only at port development, but to look at port-led development, where ports are not simply a transit point, but ports are anchors for stimulating economic, industrial, and societal development. In terms of green corridor, India has been focusing a lot on two areas. One is, of course, green corridors in terms of energy routes, and the second is digitalization. Again, both very important areas, very important requirements for Greece. And so the digitalization initiatives that India has launched with its port projects can certainly be of exploration for Greece, which can look beyond solutions provided by China. So as was made, as the point was made earlier, you can look beyond Chinese solutions, beyond Singaporean solutions, to look at India as India continues to become this strong rising power, growing at 6.5 to 7.5%. In fact, the last quarter, India has grown at 8.2% GDP. And over the next 15 to 20 years, India is expected to grow at anywhere between 6.5 to 7.5 to 8%. It's also important to look at rules-based governance, and this will become extremely important as we go ahead because these are volatile spaces. The Mediterranean is a space of huge opportunity, but it's also a space of strategic churn with what's happening in the region. Similarly, if you look at the Arabian Sea, various geographies of the Arabian Sea also are lands of opportunity, but they're also oceans of churn. And so you have to look at how you can build maritime governance and maritime cooperation that is based on fundamentally a rules-based international order, that is based on democratization, that's based on multilateralism. My last point before I leave it to the floor, a few years ago, after the pandemic impacted us, India, Japan, and Australia got together to establish what is called as the Supply Chain Resilience Initiative. The US was deliberately not kept part of it because otherwise China would say this is an anti-China engagement. This is Japan, Australia, India coming together to build sustainable supply chain resilience network. Of course, it has had very limited success. It hasn't had much success. But as IMEC potentially grows over the next 5, 10, 15 years, and Greece and other countries look to make the Indian Ocean an area for their operation, the supply chain resilience initiative, which right now is between Japan, Australia, and India, can very well sustainably bring in the European Union as a fourth player. And if that fourth player comes in, given the India-EU FTA, given EU's involvement in the Indian Ocean, this could become a sustainable rules-based framework and network for us to be able to create resilient and robust supply chain networks, which are alternatives to the existing maritime trajectory. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me okay? Perfect. Thank you very much, Datt, for the really insightful presentation. As you can see, Datt joined us online from Goa, straight from India. And I think we're building a very nice puzzle here with Wolfgang giving us the global perspective. Now we're talking about the Asian perspective of Datt and how India can involve with us. And of course, next to me I'm having Dimitri Gavalas, who is an associate professor in shipping ports and supply chain from the National Pedestrian University of Athens. And I would like to start the overall discussion because we heard a lot of mega trends, what is happening around the globe, and how we can go forward. And I'll try also to condense the information in the interest of time as well. But Wolfgang, because you mentioned about the vision, the aim, I think that was one of the keynotes from your presentation, in Europe specifically. Europe seems to struggle. Why Europe is struggling in terms of developing that kind of vision? You give us examples from Dubai, from Morocco, from other places, and how we could probably overcome that kind of hurdles that we may have in Europe. Any ideas?
I believe that Europe struggles because Europe doesn't understand its strengths. A lot of people have been very respectful and afraid of Europe over the last 30 years. But Europe was more afraid about the neighbor than the rest of the world, right? And I can put some water under that bridge. I worked for Chinese companies, and Chinese say, oh, we go to the US, Wolfgang, because it's easy. It's easy. You can sell everything in the US. What you cannot sell into the US, you sell in Africa, right? But Europe is really difficult because Europeans are demanding. Europeans have standards. So we keep Europe for the last. And the moment we can do Europe, we can do everything. So I believe that the future in Europe, if Europe wants really to play a role, and then Europe has to align internally and stop wasting energy on internal debate. And my network idea goes straight into this direction, so build a strong network. And I appreciate very much, we can all, that it's not only about goods, it's a network of cultures. It's a network of diversity. It's a network of complementarity. It's a network of people. It's a network of finance. It's a network of energy. Europe still does too much. Your countries in Europe on their own think they can do it better. Just listen to some of the leaders and what they say, right? Instead of saying, we as Europe could be stronger than the United States and could be stronger than China, at least now China is now a big thing because while Europe is dismantling its sustainability strategy, the Chinese start becoming the sustainable leader of the world, the sustainability leader of the world. And imagine, right? And it is all about not wanting to see. And I always speak my mind, right? It's not wanting to see. We complain when it's over. We lost some sustainability battles, right? We lost innovation battles. Take innovation, it's another good example. We talk a lot about innovation. We need to be competitive, we need to be innovative. Then we have innovative companies. Then they get into financial trouble. Who helps them? Maybe an investor in California and says, oh, this is beautiful French technology. Oh, this is great German engineering. We buy it. Come to us and we do it. And this is happening again and again and again. So I simply, to summarize all what I said, I can speak for hours about this, we are just not playing the game. And if we're playing the game, we don't play it well.
Thank you for that, Wolfgang. And Dimitri, you know, it's like I heard also from Datt and from Wolfgang about US, China. We just got a response about Europe, what it's doing. And I know you just returned from a trip to China. So are the US-China tensions still relevant for the global supply chains? Do you think we should take care of them or should ignore them as part of the global logistics network?
Okay, thank you, Stavros, and thank you for the invitation being here. I would like to follow Wolfgang's, setting the scene and say that in Europe actually doesn't have the vision, at least that China, with President Xi Jinping in 2013 talking into Kazakhstan, and India as well. Let us not omit that President Modi has initiated years now the Sagarmala project. The Sagarmala project is a huge project of embracing all the maritime industry, including the shipbuilding one, maritime training, port terminal construction, and so on, into the Indian business landscape. So what about Europe? What's Europe's vision? I don't know. Well, it has gone down the road through, for example, the Critical Raw Materials Act or the Net Zero Industry Act, but it's still on the road. And look at what companies, the European companies. I feel that the European companies are far ahead from the European institutions. I mean, in terms of investing in digitalization as well. Then you mentioned China. Look, China is indispensable, okay? But it's not, for me, it's not singular. Okay, we need China because it is the biggest exporter in the world. We are part, let us not forget that Greece is part of the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, as many countries, around 150 countries. Let us learn of the China lessons of how they invest around the world, of how they invest their, not only their money, but their know-how. And I totally agree with Wolfgang in his main presentation, in his keynote speak, about having a vision. Let us believe in ourselves, because don't we have the know-how in order to build terminals? Of course we do. So if we have the specific infrastructure investment funds, the know-how that we have in our country and in Europe in general, okay, we can also, let's say, compete in a way. But I would say that for the conference that you are mentioning, I was along with delegations from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, from Nigeria in Africa, from Malaysia, from Indonesia, and I was actually the only Greek, and I was wondering why I'm here. Obviously, I was there due to Piraeus port investment and nothing more. Okay, so closing, I would say also that, you know, let us see behind the main lights. Yes, there is a trade war between US and China, but don't forget that from 2023 to 2024, we had a rise in export, in trade volumes between the two countries of 2.3%. So yes, there is a trade war, okay, and until April 2025, almost 100% of the goods export is under tariff, but they have trade volumes, huge trade volumes still, okay, so thank you.
Perfect, thank you very much. And as we're talking about great volumes and about raising economies and power, Datt, I would like to ask you also your view, or India's view, if you can come to the picture, because India is a growing country in terms of economy, and it has massive potential in terms of growth and, of course, trade. What is your view on the overall trade tensions between US and China? US, unfortunately, put a lot of sanctions to India at the moment. So what's your view on the overall situation?
Yeah, so obviously, as a country that's a rising power, we have to navigate the geopolitics that's happening around us. So we believe that we don't take any sides, but we try to forge spaces of cooperation. So what we've done is, on the one hand, we've stood up to the Americans and said, look, your unfair sanctions will not work. We are not going to bend. We're not going to appease you. We're going to stand up to those sanctions. But we have used this window of opportunity to be able to expand the canvas of potential FTA cooperation partners for us. Let me give you the sense. Before Trump tariffs came into place, we only had about 11 to 12 FTA partners in the world, and they were largely smaller partners. We are now having 22 different negotiations going on right now, 22 more, with different countries around the world, and they go from the European Union all the way to Peru, to Chile, you know, as I said, to Oman, to New Zealand, etc. So we see a huge opportunity. I'll give you one example of how this is an opportunity for us. Just recently, Trump has said that he's going to put additional tariffs on Indian rice that comes into United States. Now, since August, when they have raised the 50% tariff on India, India's rice supplies to United States has not declined. It's remained stable, which means it's a stable market despite the increased tariff. Whom did it impact? It has impacted the American consumer. The American consumer who was buying rice at about $13 for a 10-pound bag of rice, Indian rice, is now buying it for $19. So India has not suffered. It's the American consumer who's taking the hit. But India has not remained, in this situation. We know this is going to be a difficult situation, so we're looking at new markets. And Philippines has emerged as a new market for us. It's a country that requires a lot of rice. We only sell 3% of Philippines' market. We have a huge scope to grow. And Philippines' rice market is 3 times the US market. So similarly, we are looking very much at the European Union, and that's why we have prioritized the FTA with the European Union. Every week, we are negotiating with the EU. And just yesterday, the Commerce Minister made the announcement that the blueprint is ready. Everything is in place. We just have to address a few technical issues. President von der Leyen and Antonio Costa are coming for the Republic Day in January as the chief guests at the invitation of Prime Minister Modi. And I think in the next 1 or 2 months, we'll be able to sign the India-EU FTA. So India is looking at this entire trade negotiation as an opportunity for India to expand its trading agreements, but to do it strategically, whereby it can also leverage this through connectivity, through infrastructure, and to become integral within political economies. And I also want to bring another point to the fore. India is leveraging its maritime geography very beautifully now. We have an 11,100 kilometer coastline, but we have 1,282 islands on both sides of India, which are part of India's jurisdiction, to India's east and to India's west. We are growing many of these islands now as frontiers of commercial and economic opportunity. And many of these on the west coast of India actually come in very handy from the IMEC's point of view. So as far as India is concerned, India looks at this as a land of opportunity, but we are not picking sides. We are basically trying to leverage every opportunity in every market that exists, even as we maintain stability between the Americans and the Chinese.
Thank you very much for that. And, I think we're painting a very nice picture. I would like to jump to the next question, and probably I'll come to you, Wolfgang. We're talking about disruption, we're talking about trade wars, or the tariff wars, or whatever you can call it. So organizations must build some kind of more adapted, more digital networks. We should enhance digital tools, as you mentioned in your presentation, in order to diversify, in order to become more agile, in order to become ready in terms of long-term strategies. And we need that kind of long-term strategy and vision, as we discussed. How easy is that for logistic operations? How easy is for logistic companies to see the big global picture, to see what is happening, and how they can adapt to the new reality?
First, I want to say it's not easy to give you the short answer. It's not easy. I just wanted to go to India. When I was a partner in consulting, I pulled out of India in 2012 because India was in a terrible situation. This was pre-Modi. So we are 10 years down the road and India is at the top. So whatever we think about Europe, what we have missed in the past, we can still catch up in the future, and we have everything that we need to do. And I don't think that the small, if you take particularly SMEs and small logistics operator, that they can develop a vision. They need Europe to develop the vision. They need Europe to develop the infrastructure. They need Europe to develop the rules. They need Europe to support them, right? Nevertheless, digitization comes. Digitization is there. You use more and more tools. I'm not so sure how many SMEs were in that survey. The survey will come out down the road, but I've seen a survey where there was so much optimism around digitalization. So it's hard, but people do not even see the need to do it. They see also more and more the opportunity. And this is because of traditional issues which we are having. We are lacking more and more people. You want to continue operations. Also, prices are more affordable. So it's getting better. It's hard, but I'm of the opinion that digitalization is unstoppable. Technology is unstoppable. And people will just do it, and they can afford to do it. It's more about, like with AI, you have to start. You have to start. I believe there is a lot of unnecessary fear around this, and it's important that they find the right provider. If you're a small logistics company, you don't go to SAP, right? You go to something which can scale, where you can start with a try package and then upgrade it. Also the SMEs have, what was not the case before, have been identified as a market. Before, also the software providers didn't really care about the SMEs, so meaning there was not enough supply of solution because it's difficult to penetrate the market. They don't have the budget, they are scared of the high upfront costs, etc. And if Europe wants to develop a vision, not sure whether Europe wants this, we are more on the Brexit track. Right? So everybody wants to do Brexit. This doesn't really help to build a common vision, right? Everybody is very happy with the small choices that will produce small results, whereas the big, let's say, competitors, they do the opposite. Yeah, so digitalization should be part of the vision. It's central. And our data regulation, which we want to dismantle now, is our fortress. Because if we say, okay, we don't care who looks at our data, guess who will know everything about us and has so much power, economic power, to leverage this. So we have to get back to terms in all, and back to rational thinking and objective thinking, need more confidence, in all areas, and digitalization is part of it.
Dimitri?
I totally agree. I totally agree. Digitalization is not something. It's not a luxury anymore. It's the way to be on the road. Otherwise, you're gonna fall back. It's I feel that it's the price of entering the market. Okay, so another interesting point is that, as mentioned, indeed, big enterprises, DP World, I mean DHL, Maersk, they have already invested in huge amounts in digitalization. But what happens with SMEs, which are the vast majority of the companies in our continent? I mean, what amounts of money can they get? What about investment tools? Okay, this is a drawback, but also, digitalization is always coming, especially in, let's say, in the transport and the shipping industry, is also coming with the fear of exposing very, I don't know, viable data. At least they feel that these are viable data. But at the end of the day, what the recent history have shown around the world is that digitalization is the key, costly or not, to the global network. And I don't feel that we are in a way let's say in the era of deglobalization. I don't feel that. I feel that we are just reshaping, reuniting, reconfiguring whatever sources we have, I mean the operators, the logistics operators have in order to use them. And yeah, okay.
Thank you very much. And I'm cautious about the time because unfortunately, we're discussing very interesting topics, but mindful of that. Trying to take your last point, Dimitri, that we're not going to deglobalize, but we're still in the track of globalization. I would like to ask everybody for a final round of comments. And Datt, if you don't mind, it's like if we can hear your view about how you see India, how you see, the global order, how it goes, and how you see the big picture, according to your view.
Yeah, thank you. So clearly the global order is going to be in a lot of, if I may say, churn or turmoil. The American decline in many ways is evident. There is also the rise of many middle powers. And India believes that there is no room for either an American-centric world order or a Chinese-centric world order. In fact, we have been saying that we can't either have a Pax Americana or that being replaced by a Pax Sinica. What we need is for the democratic center of gravity to decide the future of the world order. And that's why we have been talking of the India way, which is a third way. And I honestly believe, I was in Europe about a couple of months ago speaking in various places, and I was making this argument that the European Union should see India as the right partner for it going forward. Because in terms of many of the values with regard to multilateralism, with regard to democracy, with regard to the kind of world order we want to see, that third way that India is putting forward for the global south is something which the European Union can buy into. India believes that ultimately it's the middle powers and the rising powers which will hold the center of gravity. But what will decide the fate of what kind of a world order we see is in terms of your diplomatic socialization and diplomatic acceptability. So if you see India becomes that very important country, what we call as the bridge country, which can actually bring a global south and a global north together. We are that country that can be comfortable within the G7 plus. At the same time, we're able to hold the BRICS together. And India's strength on the global order is we don't allow the BRICS to become an anti-America forum because India is there, and India doesn't allow any forum to become anti-anybody, just as we don't allow the Quad to become an anti-China forum. And I think what the world order needs is not for an anti-anything, it needs basically positive addition of global goods. And that positive addition of global goods can only happen when middle powers, regional powers, and rising powers can hold the ascendancy and the center of gravity and not allow the world to simply become either an American-led Western order or a Chinese-led Eastern order.
Thank you. Dimitri, your view?
Thank you. I totally agree with Datt. I feel that, and we could discuss it with the audience afterwards. I don't know that we are shifting from just-in-time strategy to just-in-case one. So we need optionality, we need agility, we need redundancy. Having, in financial econometrics, we have the hedging technique. Okay, so why not look at the most possible corridors, trade corridors, I mean, that Europe can use as a hedging technique? Okay, so for example, Europe is both into the BRI and into the IMEC. Why not Egypt being as well? Okay, what is the difference actually between BRI and IMEC, for example? That BRI is a one-country scenario, adding sovereign debt in the countries, when IMEC is all about multilateralism and cooperation and market-based commercial strategies. Okay, so I feel that our what we call now efficiency is actually resilience, and resilience is being built on flexibility, optionality, and the alternatives that a logistic operator might have in order to use different strategies and different corridors.
Thank you, Dimitri. And Wolfgang?
Yeah, I have a very optimistic view, although it doesn't sound so. So why do I have that? First, I said in my keynote, we were traders from our very early days. We were always traders. And why are we traders? Because we like opportunity, we need markets, we need resources. Nothing has changed. So now you may say times have changed, all very difficult. I was sitting on a panel a few days after Lehman Brothers collapsed. It was in Delhi. And I said, this is difficult, but what we have to do is to collaborate. And I said, and there is a basis to collaborate because we are all traders. And we sailed through that global financial crisis without a lot of damage. Could be much, much bigger. Then came COVID. I say, no. So we have survived global financial crisis, we will survive COVID. Then they closed the airports, they grounded the fleet, they didn't let the people in the port. And it still continued. They closed the high street, right? So I have this view on resilience. I always had a problem with the term resilience because I say humans are resilient by design. We are very vulnerable. Humans are very vulnerable. We can be over any moment, right? No bad thoughts, but We are very vulnerable, and we know how to survive. So when now Trump 2 kicked in, I remember that the morning of Liberation Day, I was also on the panel. And I said, guys, it's just a cost increase. It's just a price increase for doing business with the United States. Right? Let them do. We do other things. And this is what business does. Business finds new ways. India finds new ways. Even Europe finds new ways, right? China finds new ways, right? The world is on track. So no deglobalization, no crisis. We are fine. It's just that we are psychologically sidetracked. You could say the crisis is hyped. We are resilient, we are traders, we are getting better all the time. I spoke to two big companies in Asia in April, so in the turmoil of Trump 2.0. And I said, how is it going, Peter? I survived COVID. We are mentally so strong, Wolfgang, you can't believe it. I have so many options, backups. I use even digital tools, and it worked. And the others said, yeah, I think we are very fine. We are just uploading every day the new tariffs, and the system tells us where do we produce. I thought I have factories in Vietnam, Cambodia, China. I'm fine. I'm not fine, Wolfgang, but I know what is my best option, right? And then the other people need to see whether we need new markets, etc. We need to survive. That's maybe the last point. Everybody needs to make a business to make a living. And we are doing this for thousands of years. And also Trump will not change this, and Xi Jinping will not change this. And I'm very optimistic from that point of view.
Perfect. I'm glad to hear that we're having a very nice roundup and a very optimistic point of view. I would like to thank you very much for the very fruitful discussion that we had. Datt for joining us online, Dimitri and Wolfgang. Please a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you very much for your time.
And glad to meet Wolfgang and Datt.
Yeah.